Hi, I'm Chris Mead. This is Crash Course World History, and today we're going to discuss 4 important conferences of World War II. But Mr. Mead, is this going to be another boring lesson on conferences that no one cares about? No, in fact, these conferences are extremely important in ending World War II and setting the stage for the Cold War. Now, let's begin talking about the different conferences that occurred during the beginning, middle, and end of World War II. First up, the Atlantic Charter. In 1941, Britain's Winston Churchill and U.S. President Roosevelt met in secrecy on a warship, Newfoundland, to discuss their respective war aims for the Second World War. Both parties hoped that the U.S. would get involved in the war on the side of the Allies. However, the American entry was not discussed. Instead, 8 common principles were drawn up, and the British-American relationship strengthened. Now, for the next conference that happened, it was Casablanca. Between Roosevelt and Churchill, Stalin kindly declined because he had his own problems with Germany and the motherland. And this was important because the U.S. became involved strengthening unity between the Allies, and now the U.S. was in the war. The next conference that happened was the Tehran Conference. The Tehran Conference was a meeting between U.S. President FDR, British Prime Minister Winston Churchill, and Soviet Premier Joseph Stalin in Tehran, Iran, between November 28th and December 1st, 1943. Stalin, Roosevelt, and Churchill at the Tehran Conference. Specific strategies and new war aims were discussed for the second phase of the war. Why did they let Stalin in on the conference? I don't know. The establishment of the communist communities in different countries is what inevitably led to the beginning of the Cold War. Ugh, way to go. Ugh. Yalta. Of course the Allies picked Yalta, not because it was the most convenient location, but instead because that wimpy man Stalin refused to fly in the plane longer than an hour. That's why we have to go to Yalta. Where was it held? Well, it was held in Yalta, in a Russian town in Crimea during World War II. The powerful leaders of the world needed some time to rest at a resort after the long, strenuous battles of World War II. The date of this conference, February 4th, 11th through 11th, 1945. And it was held during the end of World War II. The participants, FDR, the old crippling president of the United States, British Prime Minister Churchill, and last but not least, the wimp who couldn't fly longer than an hour, Soviet Premier Joseph Stalin. The Axis were not present. What led to this meeting? The Allied leaders came to Yalta knowing that the Allied victory in Europe was practically inevitable. What was the intent of the meeting? Recognizing a victory over Japan might require a protracted fight, the United States and Great Britain saw a major strategic advantage to Soviet participation in the Pacific theater. The short-term effects of this conference? Well, at Yalta, Roosevelt and Churchill discussed with Stalin the conditions under which the Soviet Union would enter the war against Japan, and all three agreed that in exchange for a potentially crucial Soviet participation in the Pacific theater, the Soviets would be granted a sphere of influence in Manchuria following Japan's surrender. Long-term effects of this conference, the Allied leaders also discussed the future of Germany, in which Roosevelt, Churchill, and Stalin agreed not only to include France in the post-war governing of Germany, but also that Germany should assume some, but not all, responsibility for reparations following the war, similarly to World War I. This conference is remembered in history because the agreements were a major concrete accomplishment of the Yalta Conference. Moving on to the final conference of the war, we have Potsdam. Truman, Stalin, and Churchill met in Potsdam, Germany from July 17th to August 2nd, 1945. This was to continue discussions in Yalta to make post-war borders to World War II. This avoided the Treaty of Versailles, avoided the fate of the Treaty of Versailles, in which Germany had strict rules to pay reparations. Complete disarmament and demilitarization of Germany occurred. Germany as to be more like a democratic by repealing discriminatory laws and putting war criminals on trial instead of how it was during World War II. Sneaky Truman did mention a strong weapon, though, turned out to be a huge atomic bomb, which we'll cover in the next lesson when we enter into the Cold War. Thank you for this lesson on Crash Course. It's Chris Mead, signing out.